Dude, happy Margarita Monday, boys.
Why is it Margarita Monday?
It always is Margarita Monday in the summers. And and Chuck is celebrating BDE because he dyed his hair. And he's claiming
bullshit.
He's claiming the sun did this naturally.
Is there a difference?
Bullshit.
It does look a little darker.
Is there a difference between highlighting and dyeing?
It looks pretty good. It looks too good for sun drench.
I'm going to go find a picture of me when I was a kid, and I'll send it to Jacob to cut it.
I was a towhead.
Total towhead.
Yeah, but
I was too.
I mean, well, you are kind of. I'd say blonde-ish.
Yeah. Blonde-ish.
Blanco.
Dude, great BDE episode.
Look at that right there. Right there.
Are we going to give that?
Right there. Towhead. I'll send that to Jacob. But
we have a special guest, one of the founders of BDE on the show. Not you, Chuck.
Much to Vlad's chagrin.
I know. I'm here to provide a whole lot of useless commentary.
And great mustache work, dude.
The mustache has really grown on me.
It's pretty awesome, man.
I was telling Kirk about there was a Kentucky player in the College World Series yesterday, along with he was wearing aviators while he's playing, and he dyed his mustache Kentucky blue. Which,
that's awesome.
Oh, that's strong.
Very strong.
I'll tell you.
A lot of expression going on now, which is great.
When we ring the bell on the IPO on the Texas Stock Exchange for digital wildcatters, I'll go black and gold. Whatever combination we want to.
I thought you were going to get a face tattoo.
I'd do that. If we go public, I'll do that. But
wow.
All right, Kirk, catch us up. We've missed you the last 2 weeks.
This is officially known as Kirk's Corner.
We need to know.
Dude, I've been diving into sports lately.
And F1.
Great U.S. Open. I mean, one of the greatest things about Happy Father's Day, by the way.
Thank you.
To everybody out there. Saw a lot of dads. Miss my dad. Love the fathers out there. It's also the same weekend as the U.S. Open Golf Championship. And it was at Pinehurst No. 2, which has some actually great history. What's great about it is Payne Stewart won his U.S. Open there in 1999, 25 years ago. Unfortunately, he lost his life a few months later in that tragic accident.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Pinehurst is owned by the Dedman family, which is a huge supporter of SMU. My wife went to SMU and actually was sorority sisters with one of the Dedmans. And Bryson DeChambeau won this year, and he's another SMU alum. So it was an incredible SMU Go Ponies.
Pony up.
Gentle Bend. I think it's Gentle Bend, by the way. Gentle Bend. Great victory for Bryson.
And he's one of the live guys, right?
And he's a live guy.
So this is a little controversial, yeah?
So the kind of aftermath, the dust up that's been going on from the media side, Brandel Chambly,
a Longhorn, and I hate to say it, but yeah, he is.
Yeah. So maybe give a little color on what that's all about.
Well, you give it to us.
He's been very vocal and very critical of Liv and the Saudi affiliation related to, all the things that we've heard in the past several years in the media, not the least of which was the murder of Khashoggi.
Yeah. This is actually an energy story in many ways, because the Saudis have been trying to really tell a new narrative about the future of the kingdom. They've been investing into sports like golf and Formula One, which we'll talk about. They're building a new city near Riyadh that's really interesting, and a new airline. And they're selling 1% of Aramco stock to do this, to pay, because they're having...
In addition to what they've already done?
They're selling they're doing another funding round. But what's interesting is the Golf Channel has decided to just go all in against Liv. And they're using Brandel Chambly as sort of the lightning rod to say that the Saudis are just evil. It's interesting. It's real interesting. So he's been painting everyone that went to Liv as people that are supporting murder and all these things that are it's just crazy what you're hearing.
What happened with the merger? They were supposed to merge, and then it's been very, very quiet.
So nothing's happened. But
okay.
Last Friday, a week from last Friday, the Liv and PJ Tour, Greg Norman from Liv and the PJ Tour representatives met in New York on Friday to discuss about this framework agreement. Some of the notes coming out of that is that it doesn't look like there's going to be anything anytime soon. there might be stuff around the shoulder seasons, but it's a very tough one because the PGA Tour is answering now to these new private equity funds, and they're also asking the players to sort of represent the tour. So I don't know what's going to happen. But what's interesting is Bryson he is the biggest star in golf right now. He went to YouTube and he has the biggest followers. He's a cool
I didn't know that.
cat. He's fun.
Cool.
He's quirky. He's weird, but he's so good with the fans.
What's his nickname?
Just Bryson DeChambeau. I think it's B underscore.
His nickname is the Scientist.
Oh, his nickname. I thought you said his handle. Sorry. But DeChambeau spent a lot of time after the win with fans, signing autographs. There's a great video of him hitting out of the bunker. One of the NBC guys hitting out of the bunker, Johnson Wagner.
I watched that last night, and I'm not a golf guy, and I found that fascinating.
And Bryson gave
him
the trophy. I mean, Bryson's been great with the audience. And so you're seeing people reverse. He actually, at the PGA Championship, which he came in second, this is the controversy. Rory, who kind of shit the bed at the end.
10-year dry spell.
And he had missed some putts. The last putt he missed, I'm like, is a hard putt. It was short, but it was a hard putt. But after Bryson wins, Rory immediately leaves and fails. He's like, I'm not giving any media interviews. And when Bryson came in second at the last major PGA, Bryson stayed and he congratulated Schauffele. So he's showing that he is an adult and he's great with people. He's great with the fans. He understands who pays the bills, if you will. So it's interesting to see that this LIV is starting to build this relationship with fan base. And I was at LIV actually when it was in Houston.
I was going to ask you, what was the experience? Because didn't you go LIV Houston?
I did. And I talked to dozens and dozens of people, and almost 100%, not 100%, but close, never been to a professional golf tournament before. And they loved it. And they were younger.
So this is attracting an entirely new crowd
totally
of
different
people.
demographic.
So you're not even competing necessarily with the PGA crowd.
At all. It's a great on-site experience.
They wear shorts. They play a 54-hole format.
It's entertainment.
Macklemore
There's no cut.
was performing.
I saw Macklemore. Great show, by the way.
I'm going to pop some tags.
And what was cool is everyone was looking up on Friday when they kicked off, and I didn't understand what was happening. Parachuters came in, like 5 guys with American flags floating on their backs, and they landed on the first hole. It was cool. So
interesting. So catch us up, Formula One.
Yeah. So let's move over to another sport, Formula One. It's interesting. Formula One has just made an announcement that they're going basically to be 100% sustainable fuel in their race cars by 2026. Currently, they're using E10 fuel, which is a blend of about 90% traditional, 10% ethanol, renewable ethanol. Interesting. That's their announcement. This is some interesting little side stories, but their chief technical officer, Pat Simons, is leading the development of sustainable fuel and spent months researching and collaborating with FIA and fuel partner Aramco. I mean, you see Aramco popping up here. Aramco is going to be the exclusive provider of this sustainable fuel, and it's currently 100% lab made.
And it's, if I understand it correctly, it's a hydrogen carbon based. They call it hydrogen carbon fuel from what I read.
That's correct.
And so the hydrogen side, what they talked about in the article I read last week was produced through electrolysis, essentially electrolyzing water.
Right.
We know most of the scale industrial grade hydrogen is produced reforming methane with steam and thermal
steam
power,
reformations,
thermal energy. And so this is a move to, I think, allow F1 to say at the track, we're fossil fuel free, the way I understand it.
Yeah. Their wording is very specific. E-fuel will have a completely neutral carbon circle. The carbon used to produce the fuel will be equal to the carbon emitted, meaning the engines will not add any extra CO2 to the atmosphere.
But if we're talking about things like corn-based ethanol,
right,
on a unit per unit basis, corn-based ethanol, I think emits more than gasoline.
From my research, this is actually correct.
And I did see some things about using sugarcane waste, which would obviously make it more sustainable and not take what would otherwise be food like corn out of the food chain. And so it'll be interesting to see, I guess, the carbon and emissions accounting around the full cycle of either grain-based fuels or this hydrogen carbon fuel.
I may have the unpopular take here, but I'm actually all for this because I've thought a lot about this. It was interesting. This week's Chuck Yates Needs a Job. I've got Chris Martz coming on, who's the senior in college, who's just been blowing up on Twitter, talking all about climate change and the actual fundamental science behind it. I think at the end of the day, if we're actually going to do something about carbon, the only way we do something about carbon is if we're all rich and living a good life. And so nothing says rich dude more than Formula One. And if Formula One's going to go solve this problem voluntarily with rich guy stuff, I'm kind of like all for it, because if they throw a bunch of money at it and we create gasoline that just doesn't pollute as much, I think this is a good thing.
Totally agree.
So I'm down with this.
I don't think your unpopular opinion. I think we all sort of agree. What we're trying to figure out is this really a net benefit or not?
Right.
That's what we're trying to figure out. Now, production will be managed by Aramco with facilities in Saudi Arabia and Spain. And in the press release, they keep going after the bigger narrative. It aims to be applicable to nearly 2 billion internal combustion engines globally, many of which are unlikely to switch to electric in the near future. So the question here is it actually a net benefit? That's just all we're asking. If it's a net benefit, who's against it? Except those that are financially motivated.
Well, what's crazy about it is our IRA does not address this, I don't believe, in any way. We basically
addresses hydrogen.
We basically said, hey, we're going all in on electric vehicles, and if we can make gasoline.
Right. I mean, the problem with hydrogen fuel is, for mass consumption is the cost and the price point. But if
and the Hindenburg, but
well, aggressive investment is led by an interested body like Formula One. Great. Let's see how the technology progresses from a cost standpoint. If it reaches the point of indifference and it's a better, less polluting option, great.
I'll give Sankey credit for this, because he's the one that told this to me. Early days of organic groceries, he just told his wife, just go buy organics, even if it costs more.
Right.
But that way we'll just make it the standard, and it'll make it cheaper for everybody else. And hopefully we kind of get there. And so I'm sort of the same way. We pay more for gasoline in the short term, but it gets us to a point of all down with it. All right, Mark, take us to the IEA.
Well, the IEA was out last week with a report, and not surprisingly, the executive director, Fatih Birol's comments kind of painting the looming threat of OPEC and OPEC Plus facing an unprecedented, as they call it, 8 million barrel a day supply gut. This dovetails with their forecast that we're going to see plateau and decline of fossil fuel consumption globally, coal, oil, and natural gas at various points in time over the next 5, 6 years. I'll first challenge the unprecedented glut of 8 million barrels a day on 103, 104 million barrel a day market. In 1986, the global market was around 66 million barrels a day. OPEC had 14 million barrels a day of spare capacity. So, it's been worse. And the factors that lead to the IEA's conclusions here about the threat of this glut is slowing growth for petroleum products, particularly crude oil and crude oil related products in China, as they do things like transition to battery electric vehicles. the fact that both parties, OPEC Plus and more importantly, non-OPEC, namely the U.S., are continuing to invest for growth in production. And so it's addressed, but not really mentioned on the demand side. But they see growth in China going from kind of run rate 6% per year to 4%, which is
Interesting.
a pretty big step down. But if you look at what's going on in India, that might be deserving of a little bit more analysis and attention. What I would also say, and I heard about this last week or over the weekend, the average age of ICE vehicles in the passenger fleet in the U.S. is higher than it's ever been. It's 12 going to maybe 13 years or 12 and a half years. And the notion that the eventual swap out of combustion vehicles to electric vehicles really cuts that particular vehicle's demand out of the picture. It actually doesn't. There's a huge export market for U.S. discarded vehicles that extends their life just in other places. So a lot of those vehicles find their way into international markets where they continue to burn gasoline and diesel.
Because cars run forever today.
I mean, what's one of the most frequently seen things on I-10? In tow.
Yeah,
right. And
yep.
So Art Berman took the opportunity and very explicitly called the IEA. He said, quote unquote, I'm calling them out on this report that this glut is a looming threat. And so, kind of throwing down the gauntlet again. And it's really a continuation of what's been going on politically between the IEA, OPEC, and the EIA and the global producers group in terms of, where does all this go in terms of transition. So it's just more reinforcement to their case that we're going to see the peaking of demand sometime this decade, which I think they're the only ones that actually believe that. It's part of their advocacy role that they've increasingly been playing over the last several years. And, Art did call into question, which we've talked about before as well. They were set up, and IEA was set up in response to the Arab embargo of the 70s, the energy crisis. One of their charters was to provide transparent, objective, and reliable data. And I think, those of us who look at the data and the tilt that they've made toward energy transition and renewables advocacy, leads to natural doubt about the reliability of the data itself. So
I don't see it slowing down. I mean, a moment of unanimity.
I'd like to hear from Jake on this.
So the bigger point of whether EVs are going to continue to grow in market share?
Well, just kind of timing of all this, and as we kind of reallocate energy demand to different sources, what comes out of a refinery is multiple products: diesel, gasoline, and all the other products that you crack and process out of a barrel of crude oil. And another good, I think, insight that Art had in his discussion was, look, refineries there's not an a la carte menu.
Yeah.
You crack a barrel of crude, you get these products in different types of yields. And so it's not that, it's not that simple. And two, you can adjust the slate of what you produce relative to kind of the demand for each individual product stream.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The refineries will be able to, be flexible as things change, if they change. I think that I'm very skeptical of any numbers projecting massive EV adoption that would somehow then mean that ICE cars are just going to be absolutely non-existent, particularly here in the US. As a car guy, I follow the market and I see kind of what's happening. I see what the manufacturers are talking about. Here in the US, if you look, like Teslas have absolutely cratered in value. Nobody's buying these EVs. Everybody's increasing the incentives. Porsche just with the new Taycan, just gave out a new incentive for owners to come in and be a first-time purchaser. I'm very skeptical about all of the numbers. Ford can't sell Lightnings to the point to where it's put them in kind of a bind. You've got this $75,000, $80,000 truck that nobody wants. So I don't think that the EV market is going to have this massive, massive impact that's going to detract from any of the oil consumption.
Do you think it's an infrastructure issue or a combination of infrastructure and
range anxiety
and just technical? I mean, so that would, since there's infrastructure, there's not enough chargers out there if I want to go somewhere. The technology's not there yet, and it's damn expensive.
Yeah.
I think it's the damn expensive because if you
there's
zoom,
also a real, because I drove a Tesla X for 6 years, but
Dude, I wish the Tesla, what's the truck? Cybertruck.
yeah.
That's what you should have drove, because it's a combination between your Hummer and a Tesla. That's how would I see Chuck rolling in.
So when we have our big monetization at Digital Wildcatters, I'm not going to tell anyone, but there will be signs. So I'll dye the facial hair yellow and black face tattoo and the monster truck
and a huge gold chain with like a emblem.
Yeah, exactly.
Big
gold.
Emblem.
There we go.
Big gold medallion.
But there's a real thing. So I wound up selling my Tesla, call it 3 years ago, because I didn't know how long those batteries were going to last. If you would have told me 25 years from now that it'd still hold 100-mile charge, I probably would have kept that car forever, because I actually really like the car. It'd be cool to, 20 years from now, take the grandchildren around, all that. But I didn't know. I mean, you could walk out one day and they don't work anymore, and all of a sudden you owe $25,000 to keep your car running. So that was a real thing too.
When you look at the average price of most like pure EVs, not hybrids, and they're just outside of the price range for the average Joe. So they are getting cheaper. But they're also, in my opinion, most of these are big pieces of shit. Like, I think Teslas are pieces of shit. Like, you ever ride in a Tesla, or you just look at the build quality, there's all sorts of mismatched panels, and it just rides like ass. So if I'm going to spend $50,000 on a car, there's about 20 other cars I'd rather buy for $50,000.
The Porsche was a great EV, man.
But it's also a Porsche, though.
I know. I'm glad I got rid of it, though.
But you look at what some of the Japanese manufacturers have been saying. For one, they knew that pure play EVs were never the move to begin with.
Well, specifically Toyota was far and away leader.
Have they gotten everything right since inception?
That,
always.
Of that sobriety.
They just have gotten everything right.
Yeah. Now, you will see an increase in hybrids. I mean, you're seeing this naturally. You're even seeing this happen with Ferrari and Lamborghini and all of
they're all moving to a hybrid engine, which is smart. You can go down from a V8 to a 4 and have electric, which is actually more efficient. But car enthusiasts, because my car is an 8-cylinder, because I realize it's the last year of the 8 and it's going to retain its value, I think. What do you think? Do you like that strategy?
I thought the same thing about my STI, because it was like the last, like, they don't make them anymore. They're never going to make them. It was the last year that they made them.
It kind of sounded like it
was a 6-speed
STD, but
yeah, I heard
STI.
I can vouch as an owner, at least anecdotally, that a V8 Raptor retains its value.
God,
I thought we just had Mark going, I can
vouch about
his STI. And I was like, wow, that was the craziest
I would never do that.
Confession ever on
He's
BDE.
never had one. What? EV, that is.
Yeah. There we go.
It's only one way to find out.
That's right.
But I think that's the one thing in all of this that we just talked about that gets lost on things is market forces actually matter.
Absolutely.
We're not going to have a glut of oil, because if people aren't using oil, nobody's going to pay for it. Nobody's going to drill for it. Nobody's going to store it. We'll just shut it in. We'll have excess capacity, but we're not going to have, nothing cures low oil prices like low oil prices. Nothing cures high oil prices like high oil prices. I mean, market forces matter, and it will adjust. I think these guys.
If you reset the arbitrage between electric modes of transportation and gasoline powered, and we're in this glut that the IEA is talking about, gasoline is going to be a pretty cheap option.
Yeah.
Now, policy and regulation are certainly the ways around that, but as we've seen in recent election outcomes, those things generally don't go smoothly, and sometimes start to swing the pendulum the other way. So we'll see.
Yeah, because that kind of rolls us into the next topic. Is so I'll kind of preface it with this: Trinity Gas, they're opening the first natural gas storage facility in Texas in the last 10 years. I think it opens in December. They had their user meeting. So think pipeline companies, E&P producers, all this, about 100 people were there. And I gave a speech to them. And basically my speech was, we're going to need so much more power. And the existing providers of power, the utilities, are not going to supply it. They just can't do it. They're not entrepreneurial enough. These grids are big, moving pieces. I mean, we talk about it every week on BDE. Dominion's already said no more data centers in Virginia.
Right.
We can't supply this. And so I made the point that big tech, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they're going to be the folks that are going to be buying the power, this incremental amount of power we're going to need for AI, data centers, all this. And they're going to buy nukes. That's what all of them are talking about. And so there was an article out this week that Bill Gates gave an interview talking about how he loves nukes. I forget what's his TerraPower. He's invested $1 billion. He's willing to invest billions more. They're opening up their first plant in Wyoming. And my point to all the natural gas guys was, you got to stop thinking about selling natural gas. You need to think about selling electrons. And whether that's something as simple as you're just Bitcoin mining out in the field, whether you're natural gas generation, you're popping it onto the grid, et cetera. But you really need to start thinking that you're selling electrons and you're selling straight to big tech, because they're all going to choose nukes. And the last thing I'll say about this, and I'll open it up, is everyone in the audience like, oh, nukes are so hard to, regulation, all this, it's so tough. And I said, for energy people, not for Bill Gates. Bill Gates can walk into Congress and get whatever the hell he wants.
That's true.
Politically, from we talked about the NRC and just all the inertia there and the complexity, and most importantly, the cost that it imposes on innovators in the nuclear space. You're exactly right. And I've seen opinion pieces that said ultimately what's going to break this logjam of crushing regulatory and political minefields that have to be navigated with, in many cases, companies just that don't have the financial staying power to get through all of it. There's no affinity among the traditional proponents, or what we would think of that should lead this, like traditional power companies, et cetera, and certainly not oil and gas companies, but politically, the way to get this done and financially from an advocacy standpoint and policy change standpoint is likely going to have to come out of big tech, because there is, as we've witnessed with the rise of big tech, that there is significant political affinity with the way kind of the political direction of this country. And I think that ultimately will get the necessary policy and regulatory change.
So 2 weeks ago, I had head of AI for Intel on the podcast. We were talking about supplying power. He was like, oh yeah, nukes. We're just going to build nuke plants right next. When Jewel, my dear friend Jewel, bumped into Mark Andreessen at a party, it was, hey,
here we go
Jewel,
again.
Jewel texted me, what do you want me to ask Mark Andreessen?
Come on my show.
I said, besides, go on a date with me, because I have a man crush on Mark Andreessen.
Please respond to a DM.
Please respond to my DMs. But no, I said, how are we going to power all this? Andreessen's like, oh yeah, nukes. It's such a no-brainer. And so the natural gas folks have got to step up, make entrees into big tech, start talking about co-locating stuff, building natural gas. You're a crack dealer. Give away the crack. Get big tech hooked on it now, or else we really are 10 years from now. we're going to be sitting around with a bunch of nuke stuff being built, and natural gas can still be at $1.
I think John Arnold is one of the investors in Terra Nova. He's doing some things with Gates. I just can't recall Terra Power. But, to the extent that you've got someone who brings perspective from both sides involved in the advocacy, that's a good thing.
I don't think these two are mutually exclusive. I think you're going to see them in tandem. The difference between powering AI at data centers versus Bitcoin miners is Bitcoin miners need absolutely the cheapest cost of power, whereas AI data centers need the quickest power, right? So they don't necessarily care as much about the price of the power. And so, yes, we're going to see a lot more nukes come online. I think it is going to be a Trojan horse, like you were talking about, Mark, to making more of these built, but also being able to power a ton of this on natural gas. You're going to see a shitload of off-grid, high-performance compute in AI data centers.
So long as we get out there and actually ask. And I don't feel like we as natural gas guys are doing that. We're being entrepreneurial enough about it, but maybe it's because I'm sitting here on my soapbox.
It's not rocket science. You have a better market for your gas. So stop selling gas and start selling power.
You know what's interesting? If you actually bifurcate AI, there are kind of two buckets. One is what I'll call the query bucket, and that's the 24/7. You're part of the NICU unit at a hospital. Queries are going out about how kids are doing, all that. That stuff has to be up 24/7, right? You've got to have 99.999 reliable power. Actually, what's interesting is training your language models. You don't have to have 24/7 power. You can get away with 98% reliable stuff. And so you can bifurcate those within an AI company. So like natural gas generation in the middle of nowhere that may, for whatever reason, glitch here and there, that's actually okay for training a data center. And natural gas folks need to be thinking about that is, hey, Monahans, Texas, it'd be great for a data center for training AI stuff. We'll back up on the grid, but if we have a glitch down, it's not going to be the end of the world.
Yeah.
So,
well said.
Yeah. All right, real quick, Mexican elections. And so as we've been doing every week on the podcast, we break down the year of democracy, 2024. Going to be more than 1 billion people that vote this year. I think 76 countries are having elections. So we've been going through each one of them. So when we look at, and we kind of glossed over Mexico because we talked to India last week. June 2nd was the Mexican elections, and it was literally everything. The way the president works in Mexico, 1 6-year term, and that's it. They also had both of their houses of their Congress. So they had the Chamber of Deputies, which is kind of 500 members, their version of the House, 128 members, the Senate of the Republic, obviously their version of the Senate. And then they had all the state elections as well. So it's kind of wild. Claudia Sheinbaum won. So first female to be president of Mexico, as well as her main competitor, female. So, and she won with 61% of the vote. And then also the first Jewish president of Mexico from a very highly Roman Catholic culture, which was interesting. And the one other thing I'll say before we jump into energy policy on this is there was actually a lot in the way of deaths. People running for office that got killed by supposedly disputes with labor unions, cartels, et cetera. So maybe more violent an election than obviously you'd like to see. But, Claudia is from the reigning party. So this is a continuation, but I think there will be some changes in energy policy.
One of the things that I read that she favors is reducing exports of crude oil and keeping those for domestic use.
Do they have enough refining capacity?
I think Lopez Obrador just was at the commissioning or ribbon cutting on a new refinery. I don't know what their capacity balance is relative to domestic demand. So good question. We've historically run not a trivial amount of Mayan crude in refineries on the Gulf Coast because those refineries are high complexity and designed to maximize value out of those barrels, those more problematic barrels. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. She wants to transition more and more power generation from thermal sources into solar and wind.
Okay.
She's pretty far left, as that party is. But she also has a background in, I believe our guest producer was telling us in our pre-show prep that she actually has a degree in some type of emissions science.
Okay. Some type. We just don't know what it is.
She does recognize natural gas, which, at least in the ground, Mexico potentially has a significant endowment as a needed transition fuel. As you know, we send quite a bit via pipeline under NAFTA to Mexico every day. So 6 years, when you've got the systemic problems that Mexico is dealing with, fundamentally, like human safety and security and violence, that's a very, very short period of time. So we'll see. The other thing about, more natural gas development, Chuck and I were talking about it earlier today, and Mexico's reserves, oil and gas reserves, are constitutionally the sovereign property of Mexico and its citizens, which is why you've not seen, just given the geologic potential of Mexico, both oil and gas, you've not seen really the typical model that, from a risk standpoint, that incentivizes big foreign capital investment, not being able to either synthetically or actually participate in ownership and development and ultimately the returns on those assets. It's more of historically has been more of a cost plus or guaranteed rate of return type of arrangement.
Expropriation day is still a big day in Mexico.
Right.
So, yeah, no, so it'll be interesting to watch. I mean, some stuff I read about is just potentially they invest more in lower carbon type stuff, more renewables. On the refining issue, I just real quick, Googled it. So take this for what it's worth, is nameplate capacity. They have excess refining capability. The way they run them, though, they run less than 50% of the time versus call it 90% in the United States. And so it's if you got them humming, yes, they have excess capacity.
I mean, that's
but
similar
the way they
to,
run now,
it's like similar to what's that country down that's being disputed? Venezuela. I mean, state-owned anything just seems to just not operate the same. Now, Aramco's a different story. They know how to run their business. But a lot of these smaller countries are just they don't put the people in place.
Well, and I've dealt directly and had partners in national oil companies, and there is certainly much more of an inefficiency in their cost structure related to just the employment numbers.
Yeah.
And they are multiples of what an efficient, like U.S. major, I think Exxon's down to 60,000, maybe less than that. And so, having reductions in force and redundancies eliminated from a G&A standpoint is really, really difficult. And so we've been through in the U.S. both in the
name a government that's ever gotten smaller.
Right.
Argentina.
There you go.
There we go. We've got
The Third Reich.
Oh shit! Wow.
Yes. Courtesy of the U.S. Marine Corps,
Yeah.
the U.S. Army. But anyway, so yeah, Mexico. I think the punchline there is just more of a turn to the left, even though it's
Which is
the
interesting
same
because
party.
Europe's going the other direction, right?
Yeah. So
Well, Mexico may just be earlier in the phase. We'll see if there's, if price controls are lifted on certain key items, then energy chief among them. What type of populist threat will materialize, and does it happen within her term? If we have a Europe-like situation evolve in Mexico in terms of inflationary pressures on the citizenry. But I think more fundamentally, the problems with safety and security continue to, always be lurking to upset the most noble policy designs.
money matters. Jake, real quick, how was Energy Tech Night in Oklahoma City?
Oklahoma City always shows up. I mean, the crowd is awesome. It was just tons of people. We all went upstairs, did karaoke afterwards.
Yes.
It was a great time.
Nice.
So,
Who
And
won?
what's your song?
I didn't have a song. Sydney did sing the Dixie Chick song about
What?
killing Earl.
Oh yeah.
What's that song called?
I won't get it.
Earl.
Or it's just called Earl?
might
Okay,
be.
yeah. She nailed it, by the way. But this was the most remarkable performances in a karaoke bar I've ever heard in my life. Like, these people were good.
Says the guy who's 8 drinks in.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of Jewel, speaking of karaoke, have you seen the video where she
That
went
was
in
awesome.
disguise to the karaoke bar and sang
Yeah.
her songs? And
I did.
yeah, it was.
Yeah. No, it was
It's
kind of
it's
amazing.
worth watching. So if we can find that, maybe attach it.
There we go. Perfect. All right, guys. Well, this was fun. Thanks for sitting in for Colin.
Yeah.
You were able to lower the seat. So
Should we shout out to our intern that did the work on the Mexico elections?
Yes. So Kelly Yates, my youngest daughter, came into the office today and helped brief us on Mexico. So that was fun.
That was cool.
She's actually got a YouTube channel where she makes Roblox videos where she gives like hacks. She routinely out downloads BDE. So
I have one more thing.
lay it on us.
Mark's, I thought, saying no, STIs are real. And secondly, we're going to out download your
A 47-year U.S. ticketed concert crowd record was broken this weekend by none other than King George Strait at Kyle Field. First concert at Kyle Field, 110,905.
Okay.
My son went.
Not only did Kyle Field break that record, they broke another record just a week prior. Do you know what that was?
No.
Brazil-Mexico match.
Really?
All right.
Yeah.
I saw one somewhat derisive tweet about it's first time something ever at Kyle Field where it was guaranteed that the home team was going to win.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. I will say this. George Strait's amazing. If you've never seen George Strait,
I have.
you need to,
He's
you
the
need to
king,
go
man.
see Willie Nelson. You need to see George Strait. You need to see Robert Earl Keen. All these guys who have retired. but
I've
are
seen
still-
Willie
And
Nelson at
what's
at the Broken
striking about
Spoke.
George Strait? I mean, he's 72 years old now. He's been on top for
40 years?
44 years. Unwound came out in 1980. Most people think that was his first number one. It wasn't. Trivia, anybody know what his
was
first
his
number
first
one?
number one?
Foolhardy Memory.
Was it really?
Wow.
Yeah, written by the great Byron Hill.
So I saw the ticket prices for this thing, and I was like, yeah, I would love to go. It's just kind of expensive. 110,000 people. How much money do you think he made on this one concert?
I have no
I was
idea.
trying to play with that.
I can probably find out.
A lot.
I know a guy that got a quote from George 15 years ago for his birthday, to have George play, and it was $1 million.
So here's the deal.
Headliner typically takes, and I know because a good friend of mine's a longtime promoter, and they're at the bottom of the, at the top of the risk chain, bottom of the reward chain. And typically what you see is the headliners are going to get north of 50% of the gate gross.
Wow.
So it's a lot, 110,000 people. I don't know what face was on those tickets. They had a big pre-sale for the 12th Man Foundation and Club. And
I was seeing like minimum $500 a ticket.
I looked, this was months ago when this thing was announced that they opened up the pre-sale, and where I like to sit was, $1,500 to $2,000.
Yeah.
Per.
I've seen Willie at the Broken Spoke, small, tiny venue. I've seen Stevie Ray Vaughan at Antone's, small venue. George Strait, has anyone seen George Strait in a small venue? Because I'd like that would be
Fort
interesting.
Bend County Fair back in the mid '80s. George played it, and I went and saw it.
You were like 1 or 2 years old. Chuck, how do you remember that?
Last time I saw George Strait was at his ostensible, when I guess technically for George Strait tours, was back in 2014 when he closed out Cowboy Rides Away tour at AT&T Stadium, which broke the Rolling Stones record.
That's not a small venue
for indoor.
Oh, there we go.
So
because
when
the
we
roof was closed.
went to go meet Modesta. We're touring her office, and they had pictures of George Strait playing at their ranch.
Yeah, playing in effect Clayton Williams' backyard.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we're on the topic, I'll do this really quick. But where does George Strait rise to prominence? Houston Livestock Show,
dude,
rodeo.
because Eddie Rabbit was sick.
Eddie Rabbit got sick.
He was sick.
And they called him.
But this is so the Livestock Show and Rodeo board is meeting that morning. What are we going to do?
I love a rainy night.
Eddie Rabbit's sick. What are we going to do? One of the guys pops up and says, "Hey, there's this guy George Strait I saw in a bar in San Marcos. He's kind of got that song out right now called Unwound. But like I saw him like a year ago. There were 15 people in the bar, but the dude put on the show like there were 1 million of us there. It was one of the best things I've ever seen, and wound up sending his private jet to San Antonio. They tracked George down because this is pre-cell phones. He was out looking for his dog. But anyway, they talked to George and they're like, "Hey, we want you to play the rodeo." He said, "Oh, that's great. Next year I'm going to tour." And he said, "No, we want you to play tonight.
Like right now."
Send the jet over, comes back. No sound check.
You just walk straight in. Man.
Walk straight. No, he actually rode in on a horse.
I do.
He was the first one to ever pull that device at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Got up on stage and was George fucking Strait, and he's been the biggest deal on the planet ever since. The lesson in that, because I tell my kids that story all the time, is if you're
Be ready
doing
for that
something,
call.
if you're doing something for 14 people in a bar, put your heart in it, because you don't know who one of those 14 people will be.
And the guy who had the best job in the world and actually got George Strait to the next level, Irv Woolsey, who recently passed away, his longtime manager. And then he lost the day after, this was recent, lost his legendary fiddle player, Gene Elders, in the Ace in the Hole band. And so they've been through a lot here in the last few months and, still going strong. But I made the mistake one time. I met Irv in Austin. We were there for some other things, music related, but Irv was there because George, it was around the time of the big Bastrop fires.
Yeah.
I think it was 2011.
I remember those.
I was supposed to go see Peter Frampton was at ACL Live at Moody Theater.
Right.
And
you don't even know who that is.
His set was
Sounds familiar.
the entire album of Frampton Comes Alive. And I'm a Peter Frampton fan.
Frampton.
Well, I get sidetracked into going out with my buddies, and Irv was among them. And I got introduced to Irv. And I made the grave mistake of trying to match Irv drink for drink that evening.
Let's end on a sports note, because I'm just going to read this out. Crazy stat of the day: since joining LIV and being banned by the PGA Tour, Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka have more PGA Tour sanctioned wins than Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, and Ricky Fowler combined.
But not Scotty.
Oh, well, Scotty.
All right, boys. Great show, man. Thank you, guys.
Good seeing everybody.